I remember the sound before anything else. Laughter, bright and careless, rolled out of my kitchen, clattering against the tiles and the framed photographs like coins on a table. It felt out of place, like a party held in a hospital corridor. My suitcase wheels scraped over the hall rug as I pulled them inside, the smell of roasted meat and expensive cologne hitting me in the face. No one knew I was coming home that evening. That had been the point. I stopped at the doorway that opened into the living room. My house slippers waited dutifully on the mat, left exactly where I had placed them 2 weeks earlier. Beside them, a pair of unfamiliar high-heeled shoes leaned against the wall, red leather, the sort of thing my wife, June, would never wear. She preferred nursing shoes and sandals with straps that comforted her ankles. June sat on the edge of the sofa, both hands over her mouth, shoulders trembling. The lamp beside her threw a soft yellow light over the room, catching the wet shine in her eyes. A tissue lay crumpled on the coffee table, another on the floor at her feet. The remote sat beside an untouched cup of tea, long since cooled, a thin gray skin forming across the surface. I dropped my suitcase handle and spoke her name. June. She jerked as if struck. Her eyes flew to me, then to the hallway behind me, as if she expected someone else to appear. Her lips parted, but no greeting came. Only a shuddering breath and a whispered, "Elliot, you are home?" From the kitchen, my son laughed again, louder now. His voice had the easy cheer of a host who believed he owned the ground he walked on. "Dad is going to love this place when we make the changes," he said. "Trust me, this remodel will increase the value. Retirement communities are lined up for properties like this." Someone answered him, a man with a booming tone. "You really know your stuff, Mark. You are making the right move before the old man gets to, you know." Unpredictable. More laughter, then the clink of glasses. My son, my only child, talking about me as if I were a burden to be shifted before the weather changed. I stepped farther into the living room. June stood up too quickly and had to clutch the arm of the sofa to steady herself. That tiny movement told me more than any speech could have. "What is going on?" I asked. "Who is here?" Her gaze slipped to the kitchen doorway. Her voice came out hoarse. "They did not know you were coming back today." "They?" I repeated. At that moment, my grandson ran through from the kitchen, a small storm of energy in a superhero t-shirt. He nearly collided with me, then froze. His eyes widened. "Grandpa," he said. His startled cry cut through the chatter in the kitchen. The voices fell silent. A chair scraped on the tile. A woman's nervous laugh fluttered, then died quickly. I watched the doorway like a stage, waiting to see who would step through and how much of their soul would show on their face. My son came first. Mark had my height, though he carried it differently. His hair had started to thin at the temples, yet he kept it styled with that careful effort that pretends not to be effort. He wore a new blazer I had not seen before, navy with narrow lapels, and a watch that cost more than my first car. He stopped when he saw me, his grin hanging in place a moment too long before it fell. "Dad," he said, "you are early." I looked past him. 2 people stood in my kitchen, framed by the doorway. A man with a large stomach pressed into a tight belt, holding a glass of wine, and a woman with the same red shoes I had seen by the door. The woman gave me a stiff smile. The man did not bother. I heard my own voice as if from a distance. "Someone explain why my house sounds like a celebration, and my wife is crying alone in the living room." Mark glanced at his in-laws, then back at me. A first flicker of irritation passed through his expression. The cozy host was gone. A sharper version of my son stood in front of me now, the one who handled negotiations and signed contracts, the one clients praised for being decisive. "Dad, take it easy," he said. "We were only talking about the future." "Your future. Our future. It is nothing bad." My gaze drifted to the stack of papers on the kitchen counter, clips and sticky tabs neat as soldiers. My heart began to pound, not from age, but from understanding. "Those are legal documents," I said quietly. "Aren't they?" His jaw tightened. His silence told me enough. June covered her eyes again. My grandson stood in the space between us, confusion clouding his features. He looked from his father to me, trying to measure which adult carried the truth. My son took a breath, squared his shoulders, and walked towards me as if rehearsing a speech he had planned to deliver later. "Dad," he began, "we need to talk about power of attorney." The room tilted. The worn jacket hanging on the hook by the door seemed to watch me, its elbows glossy with years of use. I had worn that jacket when I worked nights at the factory, when I stood in line to pay overdue bills, when I carried a sleeping Mark from the car to the house in winter. My son kept speaking, something about protecting assets and streamlining decisions. His words dissolved into noise. I looked at the stack of papers, my crying wife, the laughing in-laws trying to pretend they were invisible, and my only child, reaching for control of the life I had built. That was the moment I decided not to raise my voice. That was the moment I decided to walk straight into my own kitchen, pick up the top sheet from that stack, and make my son regret believing I would sign my name without knowing the truth. As I stepped forward, one thought pressed through the fog in my mind. What exactly had my son planned to take from me, and how long had he been planning it? I did not grab the papers right away. Years of life had taught me that people reveal more when they think you are not in a hurry. I moved into the kitchen slowly. The tiles felt colder than they had any right to feel, considering the oven was on and steam curled from a pot on the stove. The man with the large stomach set his glass down and held out his hand. "You must be Elliot," he said. "I am Warren. We have heard a lot about you." His handshake was damp and lingering. Beside him, the woman in the red shoes, his wife, gave a polished smile. "I am Teresa," she added. "Such a lovely home." Her eyes flickered to the cabinets, the counter, the framed school photos of my grandson stuck to the fridge. She looked at my kitchen the way a buyer looks at a listing that needs only minor work. My son hovered near the counter, too close to the papers, as if afraid a sudden gust of wind might scatter his plans. I picked up the top sheet anyway. There were boxes to tick, lines to sign, paragraphs in a dense font that spoke of transfer of authority and rights to manage and dispose of assets. My name sat at the top of each page, printed in neat, impersonal letters. Elliot Price. Age, 69. The number looked small next to the long list of things that could be placed beneath someone else's control. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice level, "when were you planning to tell me about this?" He ran a hand through his hair. "We were going to sit down at dinner," he said. "It is not as dramatic as you are making it. The trip to Arizona showed us that you are not as steady on your feet anymore. You forgot your pills. You got dizzy on the stairs. We just want to make sure someone responsible can make decisions if something happens." "Someone responsible," I repeated. My eyes drifted to the back door window. Beyond the glass, the small yard lay under a pale evening sky. The old wooden fence leaned in one corner where a storm had taken part of it last winter. An empty chair stood near the vegetable patch, its faded green paint peeling, one arm cracked. I used to sit there in summer, watching Mark's boy chase fireflies. That broken fence had been on my repair list for months. June kept reminding me. I kept promising I would get to it. The fence was not the only thing I had delayed fixing. My mind slid back to another kitchen, another evening. I saw a much younger Mark, maybe 12, standing by the sink with tears on his face after a football game. Rain had soaked his jersey. Mud clung to his knees. He had missed the final catch that would have won them the match. His coach had clapped him on the back anyway, yet the other boys had already begun whispering. "They said I choked, Dad," he had told me, voice cracking. "They said I lost it for everyone." I remember placing my calloused hand on his shoulder. "You did not choke," I told him. "You tried. That is what matters." People forget scores. They remember how someone carries themselves when things go wrong. I took him out for burgers that night, spending money that should have gone to an electricity bill. We sat in a booth under flickering neon. He made a promise with ketchup on his fingers. "I am going to work hard enough that no one ever talks down to me again," he said. "Not about money, not about anything." I had smiled. I saw ambition in his eyes and thought it was a good thing. I did not notice the hardness that curled around it like a seed shell. Back in the present, Warren cleared his throat impatiently. "Elliot," he said, "this is standard stuff. My Teresa's parents signed over power of attorney last year. It makes everything smoother. You do not want the state deciding things if you have a fall, do you?" His words were wrapped in the polite concern of a man who had rehearsed this speech on other older people, in other kitchens. I set the paper down carefully. "Do you think I am not in my right mind?" I asked. "No one is saying that," Mark replied quickly. "This is about planning ahead. You are always telling me to think ahead." "I did say that," I answered. "I said it every time I worked double shifts so you could go to private school. I said it when I sold the truck so you would not have to take out a loan for college." Mark's gaze flicked away. A faint flush crept up his neck. I caught it. It was small, Yet in that moment, it felt like the first crack in his certainty. A reminder that he knew exactly how much had been done for him. "Dad, can we not do this in front of the Greens?" he muttered, nodding toward his in-laws. "On the contrary," I replied, "it seems they are already involved in my affairs." Silence settled over the kitchen like a heavy cloth. My grandson edged closer to his mother in the doorway, clutching a toy car. I turned to June, who had followed us and now stood near the refrigerator, her hands twisting in her apron. "How long have you known about this?" I asked her gently. Tears pooled again. "They said it was just paperwork," she whispered. "They told me it was to help you. To help us. I did not want to go behind your back. Mark insisted it would upset you if we talked about it before everything was ready." Everything was ready. That phrase slid into my mind and sat there. Ready for what? Ready to move me like a piece of furniture? Ready to sign my name to a future I had not chosen? I took a breath and felt the old steadiness in my lungs, the same steady rhythm that had carried me through night shifts, through funerals, through lonely winter mornings when the car would not start. "I am tired from the trip," I said at last. "I will not sign anything tonight." Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. His in-laws looked surprised, as if no one had ever refused the script before. "We can talk tomorrow," I added, "after I have read every page." Warren laughed lightly, though the sound did not reach his eyes. Of course, he said. "Take your time." His tone carried the impatience of a man used to getting his way eventually. I picked up my suitcase again and headed toward the hallway. My grandson's small voice followed me. "Grandpa, are you mad?" he asked. I stopped and looked back at him. "No," I said. "I am not mad. I am awake." I saw something flicker in Mark's expression at that word. Awake. Not confused. Not weak. Awake. That night, when the time came for bed, I did not sleep in my usual spot. I sat in my worn armchair near the window, the one with the sagging cushion, and listened to the house. The laughter from the kitchen had died down. The light in the hallway went out. The empty chair in the yard watched the broken fence, waiting. The first quiet step toward justice did not feel like revenge. It simply felt like refusing to let someone else write the last chapter of my story. I knew one thing as the clock crept past midnight. My son thought he understood my limits. He was about to learn how much strength lives in a man who has already survived everything that once tried to break him. Morning in our town arrives gently. Light slips over the tops of the maples that line Willow Ridge Drive, touches the mailboxes and the cracked sidewalks, then settles on the roofs of houses built in the 70s. The retirement community sits 6 blocks away, a cluster of beige units with tidy lawns and a shuttle bus parked out front. I watched the street from the front window as the sky lightened. June slept in our bedroom, her breath soft and uneven. My body ached from travel and from the hours in the armchair, yet my mind felt sharper than it had in years. I thought of the day we first arrived in this town. We had been younger then, though still older than most of the parents at Mark's school. I was 42, June was 38, and Mark was 8, clutching a shoebox with his favorite toy cars inside. The factory job I had taken in town paid slightly better than the warehouse where I had worked before. The house on Willow Ridge looked tired, yet solid. The real estate agent had called it a good starter home. I saw it as a place to plant roots. On moving day, it was just the 3 of us and an old friend from the factory. We hauled boxes up the cracked front steps. My jacket caught on a nail in the railing and tore at the elbow, the first of many scars it would collect. The fence was already leaning in one corner back then. I told myself I would fix it as soon as we settled in. As we carried in the last box, Mark had looked around the bare living room. "Is this really ours?" he had asked. "It is," I told him. "Every wall, every squeaky floorboard, every leaky tap. Ours." That word mattered to me. Ours. Not mine. Not his. Ours. Back in the present, the house still creaked and sighed in the same places. The pipes still clanged in the morning as the shower warmed up. The difference lay in the conversations held within those walls, and in the papers waiting on the counter. I brewed coffee and listened to the sounds of waking. June's footsteps down the hall, the soft beep of my grandson's tablet as he started a game. Mark's low voice on the phone in the guest room. "Yes, I know he did not sign last night," he hissed. "He is tired. The doctor in Arizona said the tests show early cognitive changes. If the bank sees that report before the transfer, it could complicate things." My grip tightened around the coffee mug. The tests. The trip to Arizona had been my idea initially. An old army buddy had retired there and written about the dry air helping his breathing. I had gone for a checkup while visiting, thinking it would be routine. The doctor had suggested extra memory tests after I mentioned misplacing my keys more often. The results had been slightly concerning. That had been the phrase. Not alarming. Not dire. Slightly concerning. I had planned to share the report with June and Mark together. I had not planned for my son to get a copy before I had even processed it myself. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned to find June in her robe, hair pinned up. "You heard him?" she whispered. "I heard enough," I replied. She came closer, guilt etched into the lines on her face. "He asked the clinic to send the results to him," she said. "He told them you had authorized it." "I thought you had." I set my mug down. "I did not," I answered. "He lied to them. He used my health to hurry along his own plans." June looked as though something inside her had cracked. "I told him this felt wrong," she murmured. "He said I was being emotional. He said you would only worry and delay if we gave you too much information." Old anger stirred, not yet fully awake, like a bear turning in its den. "In his eyes," I said, "my worry counts less than his convenience." June nodded, tears glistening. "I am so sorry, Elliot," she whispered. "I should have trusted my instincts. You have always been the one to make sure we were safe." Her hand found my arm, fingers resting on the worn fabric of my jacket. The jacket felt like a second skin, full of history. "You still can," she added. "You still can make us safe." Her words settled in me like a seed. Later that morning, when everyone had dressed and the smell of pancakes filled the house, Mark stepped into the kitchen with a rehearsed smile. "Dad, let us sit down after breakfast and go through the paperwork," he said. "I have highlighted everything. It is straightforward." I smiled back at him, surprising both of us. "There will be time for that," I replied. "First, there is something I need to do." He frowned. "What?" "I am going for a walk," I told him. "To the bank. Then to see Pastor Reed. Then perhaps to the community center." His eyes narrowed. "Why the bank?" he asked. "To ask questions," I said simply. "Questions about what happens when someone hands over power of attorney. Questions about what protections exist and what alternatives there are." I saw it then, clear as day. The tiny crack in his confidence widened. He had not expected resistance, much less strategy. He had expected the father who said yes to every early morning practice, every late-night pickup, every loan request. "You do not need to bother the bank with this," he said. "I have already spoken with an advisor. It is all in line with their recommendations." "I am sure it is," I replied. "I intend to hear it from someone whose pay does not depend on pleasing you." June made a small sound, halfway between a gasp and a laugh. My grandson looked between us, sensing a shift he could not yet name. "I will come with you," June said quickly. Mark stepped forward. "Mom, this is not necessary," he insisted. "It is necessary to me," she answered, surprising him. "You will stay here and watch your son. Elliot and I will run our own errands." That was the second small turning point of the day. June had spent years smoothing over conflict, standing between Mark and consequences. In that moment, she stepped away from that role. We walked together down Willow Ridge Drive, the morning cool on our faces. The broken fence watched us go, one more thing that would not be ignored forever. At the bank, the clerk recognized me. "Mr. Price," she said, smiling. "Nice to see you. We were told you might be in soon about some documents." "Then it is good I came," I answered. "I would like to speak to someone privately about those documents and about my account before I sign anything." Her smile faltered slightly as the script went off course. "Of course," she said. "I will see who is available." In the small office that followed, with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a printout of my accounts on the desk, I learned exactly what Mark hoped to gain. I learned how much of our home equity he had already borrowed against through a line of credit he had arranged on our behalf. I learned which forms gave him the right not only to manage, but to sell, transfer, and invest without consulting me. The advisor, an older woman with kind eyes, lowered her voice. "You are under no obligation to sign any of this today," she said. "Nor are you required to give full power of attorney to a family member if you are uncomfortable. There are limited powers, cosign options, even third-party trustees from neutral firms." "What happens if someone has already used my information to open lines of credit?" I asked. Her lips pressed together. "Then we document everything," she answered. "We review signatures, dates, authorizations. If there is any irregularity, we investigate. We do not rush." That last sentence sat in my chest like a small stone of reassurance. Leaving the bank, I felt taller, though my back still ached. June squeezed my hand. "What will you do?" she asked. "I will give Mark a choice," I said. "He can step back with dignity, or he can learn what it feels like when a community sees who he has chosen to become." Our next stop was the church office, then the community center, where a free legal clinic offered advice to seniors once a week. I took pamphlets, names, numbers. Each piece of paper felt like a plank in a bridge I was building. When we walked home, the sun sat higher in the sky. Children rode bikes on the pavement. A dog barked at birds along the broken fence. The empty chair in the yard waited, yet the sight of it no longer made my chest ache in the same way. I did not feel helpless. I felt prepared. As we approached the front steps, I saw the curtains twitch. Mark was watching. He had no idea that the quiet man walking up the path toward his own front door carried something more powerful than a signature. I carried knowledge, patience, and a plan beginning to form. The next move would tell me whether my son still had enough conscience left to change course, or whether the lesson ahead would need to be harder. I approached the front door with a feeling that surprised me. It was not fear, nor was it anger. It felt closer to clarity, the sort that settles in a person who has stopped hoping others will behave differently and has begun calculating how to move forward regardless. Mark opened the door before I reached for the handle. His expression held the brittle politeness of someone trying to guess whether the conversation would go in his favor. "You were gone a long time," he said. "Mom should not be walking that far in the morning. She gets dizzy." June stepped past him without answering. She hung up her coat, smoothed the sleeves, and walked into the kitchen. I followed her inside, leaving Mark in the hallway. He trailed behind us, tension in every footstep. The papers still lay on the counter, neat as a staged photograph. Avery blue tabs marked the places he wanted me to sign. The sight of those tabs made something in my chest tighten. "I spoke to the bank," I said, placing the pamphlets gently on the table. Mark stiffened. "What did you tell them?" he asked. "I told them I needed information," I replied. "They were helpful. They walked me through every implication of the forms you prepared. They showed me the alternatives." His jaw moved, as if he had to stop himself grinding his teeth. "You are complicating something that should be simple," he said. "This is exactly why people need support as they get older. You let anxiety take over." I sat at the table, folded my hands, and let him talk. He interpreted silence as weakness. I used that habit to measure him. "You forget things," he continued. "You lose track of details. The Arizona doctor said there were early indicators of cognitive decline. That is not my personal opinion. It is medical fact." I lifted my gaze slowly. "You used the word decline," I said. "The report used the word mild. You added the weight." Mark hesitated. It lasted less than a breath, yet I saw it. A man who knows he has pushed a narrative too far. "I am trying to protect you," he said. "No," I answered quietly. "You are trying to protect what you want." The room fell still. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to lower its voice. My grandson listened from the hallway, pretending to play with his toy car. Teresa and Warren sat in the living room pretending to scroll through their phones, their ears tilted toward the kitchen. I pushed the pamphlets across the table. "The bank advisor explained that someone applied for a line of credit in my name," I said. "They explained how the signature on that application does not match my usual handwriting pattern." Color drained from Mark's face. "You authorized that line months ago," he said quickly. "You must have forgotten." "I did not forget," I replied. "The advisor offered to have the signatures reviewed. She said unusual activity creates an automatic audit. She encouraged me to file a preliminary request." His eyes flicked to the living room, as though checking whether his in-laws could hear. They could. Their silence grew heavier by the second. "You are blowing this out of proportion," he said, voice tightening. "Dad, this is embarrassing." "Embarrassing?" I repeated. I sat in that office and learned that my only child borrowed against the home I built with 40 years of work. I learned that he did it without speaking to me. I learned that he used a medical report before I had even decided how to interpret it. "You are correct about something. It is embarrassing. It is embarrassing that you assumed I would not notice." June let out a sound that broke halfway between a sob and a breath of relief. It came from a place buried under years of excuses made on Mark's behalf. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Dad, stop. You are making this sound malicious. You know I have always handled things for this family." His words lit a memory. I saw a much younger Mark, maybe 17, standing beside me in the driveway. The hood of his old car was open. He had insisted on replacing the alternator by himself. The part slipped from his hands, nearly crushing his fingers. He had looked at me then, waiting for praise even when the job was half done. "I told you to take your time," I had said. A task done poorly is a task repeated. He had rolled his eyes that day, a sign of the man he would grow into. Someone who valued speed more than care, shortcuts more than patience. In the kitchen, the present version of him placed a hand on the papers. "You are not thinking clearly," he said. "This is why we need the authority in place. I have been managing bills, insurance, repairs, everything. You cannot do this alone anymore." "I never did it alone," I replied. "Your mother was beside me, not you." June sank into the chair opposite me, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since my return home. "It is true," she said softly. "We managed the household for years. You helped sometimes, but you were busy building your own life." Mark shot her a wounded look. It startled me how quickly he switched roles, as though expecting sympathy. "I have always provided for you," he said. I leaned back in my chair. "You provided with our money," I answered. "Not yours." His mouth opened, then closed. A quiet shifting sound came from the living room. Warren stood up, cleared his throat, and pretended to study a framed photo on the wall. The discomfort radiating from him was almost visible. I tapped the stack of papers lightly. "These forms give you more than decision-making power," I said. "They give you permission to sell assets, manage accounts, and authorize loans. If I sign them, every safeguard that protects me becomes a tool for someone else." "You are acting paranoid," he muttered. "No," I replied. "I am acting informed." Another silence stretched out. My grandson rolled his toy car along the hallway wall, the wheels making a soft clicking sound. The innocence of that noise struck me. The future of that child depended on the integrity of the man raising him. I stood up slowly. "I am not signing these," I said. "Not today, not tomorrow, not ever in their current form." Mark swallowed hard, his face shifting between anger and fear. "You cannot do this," he whispered. "You do not understand the pressure I am under." "Then sit down," I said, "and tell me the truth." His eyes darted toward the living room again. His shoulders rose, then fell. His voice came out small. "I made investments," he said. "They did not turn out the way I expected. The market dipped. I calculated that I could recover the losses by restructuring your assets." Restructuring. Another polite word for damage. "You risked our home," I said. "You risked everything your mother and I spent our lives building." "I thought I could fix it before you noticed," he said. June pressed her hand to her mouth. "You should have come to us," she whispered. He looked at her with a mixture of shame and resentment. "You would have panicked," he said. "Dad would have refused. I needed room to solve it." "You did not solve it," I said. "You buried it." He turned away, bracing his hands on the counter. I studied him. Broad shoulders hunched, head bowed slightly. A man with the power to damage everything around him, yet frightened of admitting he needed guidance. "Sit down, Mark," I said. "This conversation is not over." He obeyed, not out of respect, but because his certainty had collapsed. The moment he sat, something inside me settled. I felt neither triumphant nor cruel. The feeling resembled a long-delayed correction, a line of balance restored between parent and child. "I will give you an opportunity to put things right," I said. "You will tell me every detail of the investment losses. You will show me every document you filled out using my name. You will give me the contact information for every advisor you consulted. We will meet with a neutral representative at the legal clinic. We will rebuild the structure of control in this household, and it will not place you above either of us." His voice dropped to a whisper. "What if I say no?" "Then the bank will proceed with an investigation," I said. "The clinic will assign counsel. The lines of credit will be reviewed, and every signature will be checked. I am prepared for that outcome." His hands tightened on the edge of the table, knuckles pale. "You would put me through that?" he asked. "I am not putting you through anything," I replied. "You placed yourself in this position." A tremor passed through him, the first crack of full recognition. Not guilt alone. Accountability. My grandson's voice floated in from the hallway. "Dad," he called, "are you in trouble?" Mark looked at me with a pleading expression, the kind his younger self once wore after knocking a glass from the table. I spoke with calm certainty. "Your father needs to talk with us," I told the child gently. "He will join you soon." The boy nodded and returned to his toys. Mark covered his face with his hands. "I did not mean to hurt anyone," he said. I believe you, I replied. Intention is not the measure of a man. Choices are. He lowered his hand slowly. His breathing steadied, though his eyes remained damp. You said there is a way to fix this, he murmured. There is, I said. It begins with honesty and ends with responsibility. Everything between those 2 points will depend on whether you learn from this moment or repeat it. He nodded faintly. That does not mean trust returns immediately, I added. It means you have a chance to earn it. June reached across the table and touched my hand. Her strength met mine, steady and warm. Warren and Teresa rose from the living room, mumbling excuses. They stepped out into the afternoon light with the uneasy pace of people who had witnessed something that forced them to reevaluate who they had sided with. The door shut behind them. The kitchen felt different. Not lighter, not darker. More truthful. I gathered the papers, clipped them together, and placed them inside a drawer. This house, I said quietly, will not be reshaped by fear or secret plans. It will be guided by clarity. Mark looked at the drawer as though it held both salvation and consequence. What happens next? He asked. That depends on whether you are ready to walk the difficult path or continue pretending there is an easy one, I replied. A long breath left him. It sounded like surrender, yet not defeat. Something closer to the first step of a man recognizing his own reflection. The chapter closed not with raised voices, but with a fragile stillness. A stillness that hinted at change. A stillness that hinted at the slow, steady return of strength. The house felt unusually quiet the next morning. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a field becomes still after a storm has passed. The kind of stillness that allows a person to inspect the ground and see what has been uprooted. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and a cup of tea. June placed a bowl of oats in front of me, though neither of us felt hungry. Mark had left early to take his son to school. He moved through the house with a strange, brittle politeness, as if he feared that any sudden movement might draw attention to the guilt he carried. I noticed the change. It resembled a man trying to walk without stepping on broken glass he had scattered himself. My notebook lay open. I had written 3 questions at the top of the page. What did he borrow? From whom? At what cost? Those questions formed the outline of something practical. A map of consequences. June sat across from me, fingers wrapped around her mug. Do you think he will follow through? She asked. He will, I replied. He has reached the point where denial drains more energy than truth. She nodded, though her eyes held worry. Not disbelief. A softer worry, the kind that mothers carry even when their children are grown. I reached across the table and took her hand. You did not fail him, I said. He made choices that shaped him. The best we can do is make sure those choices do not shape us. Her eyes glistened. She squeezed my hand once, then wiped her cheek gently. Mid-morning sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor. Dust motes drifted through the beam near the window, slow and quiet. I found the sight grounding. Small things often revealed rhythm more clearly than complicated ones. A memory surfaced, uninvited yet helpful. I remembered teaching Mark to ride a bicycle. He had been 9, wobbly and impatient. He wanted to pedal fast before learning how to balance. I told him to start slowly, to feel the weight of the bike first. He ignored me, pushed hard on the pedals, and fell into the grass. He cried from frustration rather than pain. I told you to learn the feel of it first, I had said, steadying the bike again. Balance must come before speed. The lesson did not stay with him. In the present, the kitchen clock ticked toward 10. I gathered the pamphlets from the community center and laid them out in neat rows. Each one explained a different system of support: joint decision arrangements, limited powers, neutral overseers. Each one reminded me that age did not erase autonomy unless a person surrendered it. June studied them quietly. These were always options, she said in a low voice. Why did no one tell us? They expected us not to ask, I replied. Assumptions are convenient when someone has a plan. A car rolled up the street. Tires crunched lightly over the driveway gravel. June stood, her breath catching slightly. It is him, she said. Mark entered through the front door with a manila folder under his arm. His steps were measured, careful, not the confident, brisk walk he usually carried. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen. I brought everything, he said. Good, I replied. Sit down. He placed the folder on the table and eased into the chair beside his mother. His shoulders slumped slightly. It struck me that he looked older than he had 2 days earlier, not because of age, but because of truth pressing against him. I opened the folder. Inside lay printed emails, receipts, statements, and business cards. Some pages had red pen marks along the margins. Others held small flags marking debts he had tried to manage quietly. You invested in a property development group, I said, scanning the documents. They promised large returns. He nodded, staring at the table. They said it was a limited risk, he muttered. They said the market was shifting and early investors would benefit the most. Did you research them? I asked. I read reviews, he said. Some were good. And the others? He hesitated. I thought they were written by competitors, he said weakly. I placed the document down. You trusted strangers more than your family, I said. You trusted convenience more than caution. That choice belongs to you. His face tightened. I know, he whispered. I know I made a mess. I wanted to fix it before you found out. Fixing something begins with telling the truth, I said. You waited until the consequences caught up to you. He swallowed. How much actually remains unpaid? I asked. He tapped one of the pages. I covered some of it by moving funds between accounts, he admitted. The rest is tied to the credit line. Using my name, I said. He nodded once. June inhaled sharply. Her hand shook slightly against her mug. He looked at her quickly. Mom, I never meant to put you through this, he said. I thought it would end quietly. It never ends quietly when it begins with deceit, she replied softly. Her tone struck him more deeply than mine ever could. I gathered the papers into a tidy stack. We will take these to the legal clinic tomorrow, I said. I will not make decisions without guidance. You will attend with us. He nodded. I will, he said. I want to fix it properly. You will start by calling the development group, I said. You will request a full breakdown of all charges, contracts, and communications. You will ask for them in writing. No decisions will be made without review. He pressed his lips together. They will not like that, he said. That is not our concern, I replied. You are not dealing with them alone anymore. His gaze lifted. You still want to help me? He asked quietly. I want to ensure the truth is given space to breathe, I said. What that means for you depends on how you move from this point onward. Another silence settled between us. This silence felt different. It contained the weight of choices, not avoidance. Mark stood slowly. I will make the call, he said. He stepped out onto the porch, phone in hand. His voice carried faintly through the screen door, tight at first, then steady. The conversation sounded uncomfortable. That was good. Comfort had played too large a role in his mistakes. June touched my shoulder. You spoke to him with strength, she said. Not anger. Strength. I have spent too many years believing strength meant silence, I replied. It seems I was mistaken. She sat beside me. What happens when he finishes the call? She asked. We continue, I said. Little by little. Truth has a length to it. It must be followed. Her eyes softened. You are guiding him again, she whispered. Not as a child, I said. As a man who must decide what sort of future he wants. Mark came back inside. He exhaled heavily. They are sending documents, he said. They did not sound pleased. That is irrelevant, I said. You made the correct first step. He nodded, though unease still lined his features. Dad, do you think you can forgive me? He asked. I can, I said. Not today. Not immediately. Forgiveness is not a door that swings open the moment someone knocks. It opens when the foundation beneath it is repaired. He looked down, absorbing the words slowly. The afternoon lingered with a quiet stability. Not harmony, but order. A structure beginning to form where chaos had been allowed to grow. My gaze drifted toward the window. The broken fence stood at the edge of the yard. One plank leaned forward, loose at the base. Sunlight caught its rough grain, turning it gold for a moment. That fence had been waiting years to be mended. So had we. The legal clinic occupied a modest brick building beside the community center. The sign outside had faded corners and peeling paint, yet the interior held the quiet assurance of people accustomed to sorting through difficult truths without dramatic words. The waiting area smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. A pot of weak coffee steamed on a side table. Mark walked beside us with the hesitation of a man expecting reprimand at any moment. He held a folder under his arm. I noticed how tightly his fingers gripped it, as if the papers might slip and reveal secrets he still feared to face. June touched his shoulder once, a small gesture that held no absolution, only recognition that he was present and willing to continue. A volunteer ushered us into a consultation room. A solicitor named Mrs. Carver sat behind a metal desk. Her hair was silver and pinned neatly at the back of her head. Her gaze struck me as observant, neither soft nor harsh. She greeted us with a polite nod and invited us to sit. "You are Mr. Price," she said, addressing me directly. "I am," I replied. "You indicated that there may be irregularities involving financial documents connected to your name. Let us begin with a clear outline of events." I placed the folder on the desk. The papers rustled softly as she opened them. She read silently, her eyes moving with careful precision. Mark shifted in his seat. "I did not intend to cause harm," he said. She raised a hand gently to pause him. "I will hear your explanation shortly," she said. "I need the framework first." Her tone carried a calm authority. It steadied the room. I explained everything. The attempted transfer of authority, the documents on the kitchen counter, the line of credit, the investments, the signature that felt unfamiliar even to me. I spoke without bitterness, describing the facts exactly as they had unfolded. She listened without interrupting, though I noticed how her eyes softened when I described June crying alone in the living room. When I finished, she turned to Mark. "You knowingly opened accounts in your father's name?" she asked. His voice came out thin. "I believed I could fix the losses before he ever needed to know," he said. "I thought I was protecting the family's assets." She studied him for a long moment. "Uninformed protection is often the mask worn by unchecked authority," she said. The word struck him. His gaze dropped. She continued, "You placed your father in a vulnerable position. That is the truth of the matter. The next step is determining the legal implications and the safest path toward correction." She sorted the papers into two piles. One pile held the documents requiring immediate review. The second pile held papers she intended to trace back to their origins. "You have two options," she said, addressing me. "You may initiate a formal investigation at the bank. This will freeze relevant accounts and begin verification of every signature. It is a protective measure, though it brings consequences for the person responsible. Your second option involves restructuring authority within your household with professional oversight. This requires transparency from all parties and a limited power arrangement that prevents unilateral decisions." I felt June's hand brush my sleeve lightly. Mark swallowed hard. "Which option do you recommend?" I asked. "That depends on your goals," she replied. "If your priority is accountability, the first option is appropriate. If your priority is repair, the second may create the possibility of reconciliation without sacrificing safety." I looked at Mark. His hands trembled. His voice wavered. "I want to repair this," he said. "I want to earn back trust." He sounded sincere, though fear still surrounded him. I took a breath. "I want protection first," I said. "Protection for my wife, for myself, and for the home I built. If healing can occur after that, it will be earned, not assumed." Mrs. Carver nodded. "We can establish a limited authority structure with joint signatures required for financial decisions," she said. "You may also appoint a neutral auditor who verifies major activity. This will prevent unauthorized changes." Mark looked relieved and frightened in equal measure. "I will comply," he said. "I will do whatever is necessary." Her eyes remained steady on him. "You must understand something important," she said. "Your father is not acting out of mistrust alone. He is acting from experience and duty. Recklessness placed him at risk. Humility is required to move forward." He nodded, though shame bent his posture slightly. The meeting continued for nearly an hour. She explained each document, each risk, each safeguard. The clarity she offered felt like a lantern carried into a dark attic. Shadows that once felt shapeless became visible and defined. After signing preliminary forms that protected the accounts, we stepped outside into the late afternoon light. The sky held a muted glow, pale gold along the horizon. A light breeze rustled the leaves on the pavement. Mark stood near the steps, hands in his pockets. "I did not know the situation could become this serious," he said. "You did not want to know?" I replied. "Wanting comfort does not erase consequences." He stared at the pavement. "Dad, is everything between us ruined?" I considered my words carefully. "Nothing is ruined," I said. "Some things must be rebuilt. There is a difference." He lifted his eyes slowly. "You still trust me enough to let me try?" "I trust the process we set in place," I said. "Trust in you will depend on your actions from this point." He accepted the answer with a quiet nod. We walked home together, though none of us spoke. The quiet felt different from the silence that had preceded conflict. This quiet held awareness. It held the sharpness of a person beginning to see the edges of their own behavior. When we reached the house, my gaze drifted toward the yard. The broken fence leaned in the same familiar way, though the sight no longer pulled at me with the same heaviness. I walked toward it, placed my hand on the loose plank, and pressed it gently. It shifted under my palm. Mark approached slowly. "I can help with that," he said. "If you want. I want you to focus on the other repairs first," I replied. He nodded. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long across the grass. A single chair stood beside the fence, worn and waiting. It reminded me of long summer evenings when I sat watching fireflies with my grandson. The chair held every season we had lived through together. I returned to the porch and sat on the step. June joined me. Mark lingered near the fence, as though waiting for permission to leave. "You may go," I said gently. "We will speak again tomorrow." He hesitated. "Thank you," he whispered. I watched him walk down the path. His stride lacked confidence. It carried the posture of a man learning humility. That sight offered a small shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something quieter. A recognition that truth had pierced the surface at last. June rested her head lightly against my shoulder. "You handled today with strength," she said. "I handled it with clarity," I replied. "Strength will return as we move through each step." The evening air settled around us. The smell of grass rose from the yard. A single bird perched on the broken fence, balanced with ease on the fragile plank. That small sight felt symbolic. Sometimes a structure needs to lean before anyone realizes it requires care. The house felt steadier that night. Not healed, simply steadier. I woke before sunrise the next morning. A faint blue light rested against the curtains, the sort of light that arrives before the world decides which direction the day will take. June slept beside me, her breathing steady. I lay still for a moment, allowing the quiet to settle in my chest. A clear mind often arrives at this hour, before voices, obligations, or echoes of conflict begin their usual climb. I rose, dressed, and walked into the yard. The grass held a thin layer of dew that soaked my slippers. The broken fence tip leaned slightly further than it had the day before. I examined the loose plank, pressing the wood between my fingers. It had weathered more seasons than I had cared to admit. A memory surfaced. I saw my younger self kneeling beside that same fence, years earlier, hammer in hand. Mark had been 4, carrying nails in a small tin. He had pressed them into my palm one at a time, proud of his role. I had told him he was helping to keep the house safe. He had looked up at me with wide, serious eyes and made a promise that came back to me with surprising force. "I will help you forever, Dad." The memory stung, though not with bitterness. It felt more like a faint bruise pressed too early. My neighbor, Mr. Holleran, passed by with his dog. He lifted a hand. "You are up early, Elliot," he called. "I wanted some air," I replied. He nodded in understanding. His dog sniffed the fence before trotting on. Mr. Holleran paused. "I heard your lad is home for a bit," he said. "Good to see families close." I studied his face. There was no judgment, only goodwill. He had no idea what had unfolded behind my front door. "It is complicated," I said. "Most things worth fixing are," he replied. He tapped his cap and continued down the street. His words lingered like footprints on frost. Inside, I found June in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She moved slowly, as if each step carried the weight of the previous day's revelations. "There is porridge on the stove," she said, "and tea steeping." I kissed her cheek. "You slept lightly," I told her. "So did you," she answered. The knock on the door came sooner than expected. Mark entered without waiting to be invited. He carried another folder, thicker than the last. His eyes appeared tired, though determination sat beneath the surface like a contained flame. "I have everything you asked for," he said. "The development group sent the contracts. I printed everything." "Good," I said. "Sit down." He did. The chair creaked beneath him. June placed a cup of tea in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it, as if the warmth might steady him. I opened the folder. Contracts. Emails. Receipts. Notes he had scribbled during calls with advisors who had sold him visions without caution. Some pages revealed dates that lined up with holidays he had skipped visiting us. Others showed his growing desperation as the investment faltered. June gasped softly at one page that listed a penalty fee larger than several months of our mortgage. "You hid this from us," she said, her voice calm but wounded. "I wanted to fix it before you found out," he repeated, though the words no longer sounded defensive. They sounded hollow. I continued reading. A particular email caught my eye. It referenced a decision he had made based on an assumption that my health would eventually decline enough to justify full transfer of authority without complication. I held the page up. "You wrote this," I said. He winced. "I worded it poorly," he murmured. "You wrote it with certainty," I replied. "You treated my aging as a resource." His eyes watered, though he did not cry. "That is not who I want to be," he said quietly. I placed the paper down. "This version of you wrote it," I said. "That version must be confronted, not excused." He nodded slowly. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents. I guided the pace. He answered every question without hesitation. June watched him with a mixture of sadness and resolve. At one point, he looked up at me. "What did you think of me before all this?" he asked. I considered the question. "I thought you were a man who moved too quickly," I said. "I thought you relied on confidence more than clarity. I thought you believed fear was weakness. I thought you carried ambition without guardrails." He swallowed. "And now," he whispered, "I think you are someone standing at a crossroads," I said. "You may continue forward with humility or step back into the shadows created by your own choices. That path is yours to decide." His shoulders lowered. Not in defeat, in acceptance. Late in the afternoon, I left him and June to rest while I walked to the community center to attend an information session for older residents. The room held a dozen people seated on metal chairs. A local officer spoke about safeguarding financial autonomy. I listened carefully, taking notes. Some attendees asked questions. Others sat silently, as I had once done, assuming trouble would never reach them. A man beside me leaned over. "My daughter handles everything for me," he said. "I trust her completely." I looked at him. His trust appeared sincere, though unexamined. "Trust is important," I replied. "Protection is equally important. They must work together." He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Walking home, I watched the sky turn pink above the rooftops. Warm light spilled from windows along the street. A sense of quiet resolve built within me. Something inside had shifted since the day I returned home unannounced. It felt as though a part of me that had dozed through the comfortable years had finally risen. When I reached the house, I found Mark sitting on the porch steps. He held the old jacket I had worn during my factory years, the one with frayed elbows and a faded collar. He looked at it with a depth I had rarely seen in him. "Dad," he said softly, "did you really wear this every night for work?" "I did," I replied. "It kept me warm. It held together longer than it should have." He ran a thumb over a worn patch. "You worked so hard," he said. "I do not think I ever understood how much you gave up." "You understood," I said. "You simply forgot." He looked up with wet eyes. "I want to remember," he whispered. "Then start with your next choice," I said. He stood, his posture straighter, his breath steadier. "I will meet with Mrs. Carver tomorrow," he said. "I have questions for her. Questions about what accountability looks like in practice." "That is a beginning," I replied. He nodded once, then walked inside. I remained on the porch. The yard lay quiet. The broken fence stood unchanged, though the sight of it no longer troubled me. Something inside felt realigned. That night, after everyone slept, I sat in my armchair and reflected on a promise I made long ago. I had vowed to protect my family, not through force, but through steadiness. That vow remained intact. The family had bent. It had not broken. The following morning arrived with a stillness that felt deliberate, as though the world itself expected a reckoning. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh pot of tea, reviewing the notes I had taken at the community center. June moved about the room with calm purpose. She placed a bowl of fruit beside me without speaking. Her silence no longer carried fear. It carried assurance. Mark stepped into the kitchen. He wore the same blazer I had seen when I first arrived home, yet something in his posture had changed. His shoulders no longer leaned forward with entitlement. His eyes met mine directly, without bravado. "I spoke to Mrs. Carver again," he said. "She explained the next steps. She wants us to review the revised authority documents together." "Good," I replied. "She understands our needs." "She also told me something else," he said quietly. "She said there are irregularities in one of the advisor's agreements. She believes I may be eligible to recover part of the losses." "That is welcome news," I said. "Recovery will not erase what happened. It may offer direction." He nodded. "She asked whether you intended to pursue a formal complaint." "I have not decided," I replied. "My decision will depend on your behavior in the coming weeks." Mark accepted that with no argument. We gathered our things and walked together to the clinic. The morning air felt cool and sharp, carrying the scent of pine from the trees lining our street. I noticed how Mark adjusted his stride to match mine. A small gesture, yet meaningful. Respect can be communicated in simple steps. Inside the meeting room, Mrs. Carver greeted us with a calm smile. She handed me a clean stack of documents. These include limited authority provisions, she said. Your son will hold no power over accounts without your direct approval. All transactions above modest amounts will require dual signatures. Major decisions will receive oversight from a neutral officer. This arrangement protects your autonomy fully. I read each line carefully. The language was clear and firm. No ambiguities that could be twisted or misinterpreted. Mark waited, hands clasped, eyes lowered. I signed the first page. His breath left him in a slow exhale. He added his signature beside mine. Not above, not below, beside. The symbolism did not escape me. After the final page was complete, Mrs. Carver cleared her throat gently. There is one more matter, she said. The development group you invested in has been flagged for breaches involving several clients. You may become part of a collective review if you choose. This could provide restitution. Mark looked genuinely startled. I did not know that, he said. You were not meant to, she replied. They concealed risks behind polished presentations. The best course now is transparency. He nodded, absorbing the information. Thank you, he said softly. She looked at him with a measured gaze. Your father has taken every appropriate step, she said. You now have the opportunity to do the same. When we left the clinic, the sky held a clear brightness. Sunlight caught the edges of the leaves, turning them almost silver. Mark walked beside me. Dad, he said, there is something I need to tell you. I continued walking, listening. I spoke to the bank about the credit line, he said. I told them I used your name without permission. I told them the signature on the application was not yours. My steps slowed. What did they say? I asked. They said it will be reviewed. They said it may affect my own accounts. They also said honesty would influence the outcome. He paused. I gave them a written statement. I stopped walking. He faced me directly. You did the right thing, I said. I needed to, he replied. I needed to face all of it, not just the parts that were convenient. We resumed our walk. The houses on Willow Ridge Drive stood quietly, their windows catching the late morning light. My own house came into view, familiar and weathered. The broken fence waited, unchanged. When we reached the garden gate, Mark spoke again. I want to mend that fence with you, he said. Not today, not while things are still settling. One day soon. I want to repair something real, with my hands, beside you. A simple request, yet it contained more sincerity than any apology he had offered. I will accept that, I said. He smiled faintly. June waited on the porch, watching us carefully. When we approached, she placed her hand against Mark's cheek. Her expression held no anger, only truth. You are learning, she said softly. He pressed her hand gently. I am trying, he replied. That afternoon, after Mark left to collect his son from school, I sat in the yard. The old chair waited beside the fence. I settled into it slowly. The wood creaked under my weight, a familiar sound that carried no discomfort. The breeze moved through the grass. Birds called from the branches. The world felt aligned in a way it had not for weeks. My gaze rested on the broken fence. It leaned, though it stood. As I sat there, something subtle shifted in my understanding. The events of the past days had not been about property alone, or signatures, or misplaced investments. They had been about boundaries, the kind that keep a person whole, the kind that remind a family where its center truly lies. I felt no triumph, only clarity. Mark had received consequences, not punishment. Consequences shaped by truth and guided by community, law, and patience. Justice had arrived not through confrontation, but through structure and steadiness. The sun lowered in the sky. June stepped outside and joined me. She rested her hand on the back of my chair. We watched the yard together in quiet harmony. Do you feel at peace? She asked. I feel restored, I said. That is enough. A long moment passed. I believe he will become a better man, she whispered. I believe he has taken the first honest step, I replied. The road ahead is his to choose. The breeze rustled the loose plank on the fence, making a soft tapping sound. I let my eyes close briefly. A thought formed, gentle and sure. A man's strength does not lie in avoiding storms. It lies in remaining upright when the storm has passed, ready to repair what matters most. That thought stayed with me. It settled in my chest, steady and enduring. The story did not end with victory or defeat. It ended with truth, dignity, and the quiet promise of renewal. And that, I realized, was enough to carry me forward. If you want an epilogue, a condensed cinematic trailer version, or a prose adaptation suitable for YouTube narration pacing, I can create it. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Mark attended each meeting with the diligence of someone who finally understood the seriousness of responsibility. He submitted documents, answered questions, and followed every instruction offered by the solicitor and the bank. His tone shifted from defensive urgency to thoughtful patience. He no longer tried to fill silence with reassurances. He allowed the truth to stand where it needed to. June and I repaired our routines with steady hands. We cooked meals together, tended the garden, and walked the same streets we had walked for decades. People in the neighborhood greeted us with familiar warmth. None of them knew the full story. The dignity of keeping private matters contained felt like its own form of strength. One afternoon, Mark arrived with his tools and a hesitant smile. "Is today a good day for the fence?" he asked. I nodded and handed him the box of nails. We worked side by side in unhurried silence. He held the planks steady while I hammered the first nails. Later, I steadied the wood while he hammered his own. The rhythm of metal against timber carried through the yard with a simple honesty. No grand apologies. No dramatic speeches. Only shared labor, the oldest form of understanding between father and son. When the last plank was secured, he breathed out slowly. "I want to keep learning," he said. "Not to repay a debt. To become someone you can trust again." I studied him for a long moment. "You are moving in the right direction," I replied. He nodded once, as though receiving instructions he intended to follow. Evening light stretched across the yard. The fence stood straight, no longer leaning, no longer neglected. It looked ordinary to anyone passing by. To me, it carried the weight of everything we had confronted. I sat in the old garden chair. The wood felt slightly warmer than usual, as if it recognized this return to quiet stability. June brought out 2 cups of tea and placed one beside me. "You kept the family standing," she said. "I kept the truth standing," I replied. "The family will follow in time." She smiled, touched my shoulder, and watched the sky change color. The restored fence cast a long shadow across the grass. A simple thing, yet made meaningful by the steps that led to its repair. I realized that life rarely offers victories shaped by triumph. It offers moments of clarity shaped by patience. Moments where a person sees what nearly slipped away and understands why it must be held more firmly. As the last light faded, I understood something with complete certainty. Age had not weakened me. It had revealed the depth of my resilience. That realization settled peacefully within me, steady and enduring, like the final glow of the evening sky.